So I was thinking today, building off of the conversation from last week and the week before, I thought we could look at this idea of attentiveness a little bit more and focus. We were talking about it drawn from fasting. So this is a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says, "Ala kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun an ra'iyati," that indeed all of you are shepherds and all of you are responsible for your sheep, your flocks. And then there's a verse in Surah Al-Muminoon that says, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِأَمَانَاتِهِمْ وَعَهْدِهِمْ رَاعُونَ, that those who essentially are watching over their trusts and their oaths, right? But this word ra'un is the same root as this word ra'in that says all of you are shepherds. And there's essentially a relationship that's there that I'm hoping we'll be able to explore at some point in the conversation, but I wanted to start with the hadith, right? So this word here is essentially what means shepherd. And you have here a word that means flock, ra'in and ra'iyati. Why do we think there's a specification of these words of shepherd and flock as opposed to something else? Yeah.
Because a shepherd has to take care of its flock.
Yeah, so why don't we do this just so we get everybody talking, right? Maybe talking pairs, person sitting next to you. What are like some of the things that are associated when you're thinking about this? All of you are shepherds and all of you responsible for your flock. Just some takeaways. Where does your mind take you? Qualities of a shepherd, etc. The qualities of, a flock. What is the relationship there? If you could talk to each other about it, and then we'll come back and we'll kind of discuss. And that was great, Hafsa, just as a starting point. So things like that. You can talk for a few minutes and let's see where it goes.
I was just like, and there's like the sheep are supposed to be different edges, right? It's the shepherd's job to make sure that they go into like the we've got like even if we digress, is we've got more than that. But it could be like either external or internal.
I also kind of see it as like
I see it as like shepherds who nurture sheep.
a demanding job in the sense
Not only to like the guy or like lead to like what they do. It's the box. Take the sheep from like one place to the next. Like you see shepherds like on the street. Like so I never see like you go. I've seen that already. It's just like after running to the street. I see the guys like the sheep. They're also like shepherds are responsible for the sheep nurture.
Yeah.
There's also people who like use like
Oh, go for it. Keep talking.
Which they like the prophet, that's what they do. They're like
That's what I feel like is like our you have your dependence. Like I don't think it has to.
So what do we talk about? What do we think? Is shepherd? What are some things about a shepherd that we feel like we can draw from this? Why are these words used, right? Because fundamentally, when you're looking at Quran, you're looking at Hadith, the idea is that there's not anything like without meaning in terms of the words of God or the words of the messenger of God. And to extrapolate meaning is not always just what is most apparent or simplistic, but we want to get deeper into it and to be able to draw in terms of what is both practical, what is rooted in wisdom, critical thinking, depth, right? So what do you think? Why is this something that is being constructed in this way? Yeah.
so we know that all of the prophets were shepherds, not only in like this symbolic sort of not only in the symbolic way, which like they were sort of like spiritual and at times even like governmental heads of the community.
Okay.
They also sort of like were like actual shepherds as well. So like, just in the sense of like, has that symbolic quality of someone who's sort of like put in a position of authority and guardianship over another group of people.
Yeah, and they were shepherds of sheep, right? They're not shepherds of camels or shepherds of cows. They're shepherds of a very particular type of animal. What else? What other things come to mind?
Someone in the chat said that shepherds are those who condition their heart to be patient and protect their sheep.
Okay. Patience. Protection. Anything else?
Discipline.
Discipline, you said? Discipline.
We were talking in our group about like how it can be a metaphor for both the internal and external. Like you need to be able to have like direction and to shepherd your own thoughts before you like. Well, for me, I thought it was like everyone has a community and everyone has a responsibility to their community and is a leader within their own right. But in order to do that, we connected it to like the internal, which is like nafs, which is just
Which is like your thoughts, which are sheeps, which digress, and you as a shepherd have to like bring them back.
Oh, so nice. What a great insight. There, that's really great, mashallah. This is as a teaching tool. Do you need your bag, man?
No, it's okay. I'll just
You
get
sure? Okay. I didn't know. I was gonna grab it and then I didn't know. As a teaching tool, also, the Prophet ﷺ is like an amazing communicator. And so the utilization of a metaphor here is important to be able to then draw more metaphorical analysis, which is why I wrote metaphor here. And that's great, right? The relationship, between oneself and their thoughts. What else?
Someone also said that a shepherd not only tends to his sheep, but also guides them through life. Likewise, we are responsible for providing for our families and helping them navigate through life and seek wisdom together.
Yeah, so I'm here. Okay, yeah, great. Anything else? How does this relate to the sheep part to it? Yeah.
the sheep provides livelihood.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Well, Krishna said something about how like when you see like shepherds, like they are responsible for their own sheep, but then they also have the power to like abuse them or mistreat them. And so you have a like as someone in a position of power, you have a responsibility of treating the people you're responsible for like well.
Okay. So maybe we can say power and responsibility. Sorry, I don't like have the ability to write today. Yeah.
So they don't just rely on the shepherd for protection, but also the shepherd sort of acts as like a means for guidance to like sustenance. So the sheep sort of like are reliant on the shepherd on like a bunch of things.
Okay, yeah, I think Rihan was saying something similar. Guidance, reliance. Any other thoughts? One of the things that's really interesting about the Quran and the Hadith is that the Quran especially is very conscious of itself as a text. So when you open up the book, it says on its second page, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. Like it knows it's a book. And it talks about itself in this kind of framing of consciousness and awareness. And in numerous spaces now, it's giving an idea of things that one can aspire towards in terms of an idea of goodness. It's not relative, right? So the Quran, for example, says, وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنَ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Right, that we revealed, from the Quran, what is a healing and a mercy for people of faith, right? And you can look at that verse in terms of it being about kind of the Quran is Shifa, and Surah Fatiha is a source of actual healing. You know, there's narrations where people would read Fatiha as a way to help heal someone's physical ailment, as well as extrapolating from it remedies that are about spiritual maladies and things as such. But also, if we're trying to understand what is good, to be like the Quran is good. And so your Islam should be something, if it's really like the Quran, which is good, that's also a source of healing, not a source of destruction, a source of mercy, not a source of oppression, right? May Allah protect us from it. When we're thinking about what does goodness mean, there's hadith that says, تَخَلَّقُوا بِأَخْلَاقِ اللَّهِ, that essentially embody the characteristics of God. Because we know that God is good, and to then be like God is to also be good, as much as we can actualize the divine names of God. So God is merciful, so to be merciful is good. What is making an echo? Maybe that was me. Or to be just, or to be compassionate, right? The Prophet ﷺ is said to be essentially an explanation of the Quran, and his character is the Quran. So if you want to be good, be like God, be like the Prophet, be like the Quran. And now in the wisdom of this hadith, it's giving us now a dual role that we can fit into. You are all shepherds means that all of you are shepherds. كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ, and all of you are responsible for your sheep. What does this mean? If I am this and I am this, so I am a shepherd and I am a sheep, if you go with the metaphor, what does it mean that you're not them? Do you get what I'm saying?
Sorry, I lost you at not done.
What do you think? Why are you nodding your head?
So if you're like not the shepherd or not the sheep.
If I'm a shepherd or I'm a sheep, it's also then giving me an understanding of something to not be. So when you have this metaphor of a shepherd and a sheep, what is there? What is the shepherd protecting from? What is the shepherd guiding away from? What is it? Great. You can't be a wolf and be a shepherd. Does it make sense? Right? The idea is to not be predatorial. The idea is to not be one who is abusive. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying, "Kullukum ra'in," be a shepherd, don't be a wolf. Does that make sense? Why does it make sense?
I feel like, well, applying it today, for example, in Islamic countries and governments, like, or just governments in general, we have like wolves in power, and they're obviously not taking care of their people, so they're not like fulfilling something that is integral to Islam, is being compassionate and kind.
Yeah. What is the wolf trying to do to the sheep?
Hurt them.
Hurt them, eat them, right? They don't care. The shepherd is in a sphere of leadership. There's a paradigm of responsibility that's rooted now in this, right? Arabic is a really deep, beautiful language. English is also pretty deep if you get into it. But Arabic in and of itself, a lot of the nuance gets lost, right? So in this, you have the same root as the word for question, right? Sawal in Arabic, right? You have cognates in Urdu and Hindi, maybe in Bangla, right? But essentially it's you're going to be questioned about this, right? The questioning comes in the sense of now responsibility. And that question is going to be posed to you by the divine. So as a shepherd, you're going to be responsible, whether you own that responsibility or not, but it's in the frame now of being within these characteristics: patient, a protector, somebody who's leading something to a place of goodness, right? The shepherd is not entrusted to look after one that is in its own kind of possession as such. A shepherd is looking after somebody else's sheep, not necessarily their own. And you get 50 sheep, you can't come back to the person who entrusted you with their flock to look after it as your job and say, sorry, one of them was an idiot, so I just left it in the grazing field, or I didn't like the hair texture or skin color of one, or any of those things. Somebody gave you 50, you better come back with 50. The wolf is not necessarily thinking now through a prism of protection. The wolf is also just thinking through the prism now of what is physical satiation, immediate gratification. You can't be a shepherd. Yeah, you can't be a shepherd and be a wolf at the same time. How does this fit into what we're talking about in terms of fasting and tahajjud over the last couple of weeks? Does it tie in anyway?
We should be practicing. If we're going so far as to like fast, we should be know what we're fasting for, what we should be embodying.
Yeah. What else? Anything else? What's the whole point or one of the points of it? What are you thinking?
Kind of like in relation to fasting and like you're trying, well, you're not trying to, but you're seeing what your limitations are, kind of you're in a way like humbling yourself through the process and like kind of like seeing like where it is like the areas that you still need kind of work in.
The physicality of the act in and of itself is not the goal. But as you deepen now with spiritual exercise, the idea is that it's meant to have inward transformation. And so an act like fasting, for example, is rooted in an inaction. You're not doing, you're keeping yourself from doing, but you're also now elevating the consciousness. So you're not the wolf that is driven purely by its stomach and its physical satiation. You're recognizing that even in moments where you can render what is permissible, impermissible, so that you are in control and the physical is not in control, and you're not deepening now in the pursuit of just your own egocentric needs, that renders now an absence of this, as well as also harnessing an increase in these things, right? Because what's the relationship to a shepherd and sheep? The way that we're saying now that all of the messengers were shepherds of sheep. They're not shepherds of other animals. A sheep in and of itself, it doesn't have the ability to see so far in the distance, right? If you've ever seen a sheep, have you ever seen a sheep, right? Has anybody not ever seen a sheep before? It's not going to really work if we don't know what a sheep looks like. Huh? It's a sheep, right? You look at sheep, they can only really look at what's going on in front of them. You know, they can't look like so far in the distance. So if the shepherd is here and the shepherd's line of vision goes in different ways, but the sheep is over here. There's my sheep. The sheep have tails.
Yeah.
There we go. The sheep can only see here, and it's going to see in a certain radius. It's not able to look into a distance the way that it now has one that's able to look further for it. Does that make sense? One of our aspects of being now in this dual role is that you, as a sheep, are also going to be more prone to something predatorial, a vice, right? In our spiritual tradition, we have what's called dunya, the materialistic world. We have the nafs, the lower self, the ego. We have hawa, desire, and we have waswasa, like shaitan's whispers. These things are now not going to be able to come as strongly as they can when you're actually in a multitude of other members of a flock. But when you're all alone and isolated, that's the one that the wolf is going to try to attack, right? It's going to go after the weakest link. You see? And we can understand some things from this as well. You're stronger when you're with each other than when you're by yourself, but you want to be like the shepherd. You don't want to be like the wolf. And so the wolf has a nature of also being able to go after one that is weaker than it and to isolate and create weakness. And when you look at this now through a prism that is rooted in capitalistic greed, oppression, supremacy, patriarchy, that's what these systems seek to do. They seek to isolate. They seek to now render a sense of consciousness that's not rooted in a heart that has been fasting, or in a soul that's been in a state of prostration that draws strength from it. That it tells you that there's something wrong with you if you're actively going to take care of people who are ill or look after the elderly and orphans and these kinds of things. Because the primordial state it claims is whiteness, and you want to aspire towards that. And it's essentially now rendering us into a state of isolation that makes it much easier now to fall victim to the predatorial wolf. That says, I gotta look and be in these ways in order for me to gain some sense of belonging. Do you get what I'm saying? You don't want to be a wolf like that, who only allows for somebody to be with you in the sense that they have to forego everything else that is about them that makes them who they are. Do you get what I'm saying? So you want to be like the shepherd, because the prophet who is like the Quran, who is sent to be a representative of everything that is good and a mercy to the world, on behalf of a God who is greater than any good that we can understand, he said, be like a shepherd, which also means then you can't be like something that keeps you from being a shepherd. Does that make sense? What do we think? Yeah.
Okay, so well, even before this, but especially from taking away what you just said, I feel like it established that capitalism is antithetical to Islam because it requires that people are constantly asking for more and more and more. There's no satiation, it's insatiable. Like, people are going to keep putting people over and profit over people until they're forced to stop. And so at this point in time, how do we get Muslims to ask themselves, what would Prophet Muhammad do? He wouldn't be sitting here complacent in the system. He would be fighting against it. He would be a revolutionary. I feel like, I mean, I can't speak to that because, but I don't know. That's not at the forefront of Islam. That's not what people are talking about. And I feel like that should be our number one priority, especially considering the state of our countries, our Muslim countries.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because it would all be rooted in conjecture, right?
What's that?
The idea of me being able to say, this is exactly what the prophet would say today, is going to be based off of something that's still very subjective and anecdotal.
But yeah.
But I get what you're saying.
Because oppression is talked about and fighting for the oppressed is talked about and prioritized, but not in reality, not here. I mean, maybe in Palestine, maybe in Sudan, they're fighting, but not here. Here we're just
I think on local levels, you get a combination of both, right? There's definitely people who work at every segment, societally, local, state, national. We might not hear their stories, but it doesn't mean that they don't exist. I could put you in front of 100 people who are out there right now at the front lines, but a product of supremacy is to erase narrative and all of those kind of frames.
I'm sure they exist, but I mean, when we're in the masjid and we're learning about Islam, I mean, you can't that's not your fault. You can't do anything about that. But just I feel like there's a priority level of things that need to be and because of that, obviously that's how governments are able to mold Islam and make it into something that it's not, and prioritize things they shouldn't. But it serves the Quran serves and Hadith serves so many things for different time frames of history. And I think for this time frame, there's a certain set of priorities that are not they're purposely by design, obviously not being put like at the forefront of what we should be caring about. Because I don't know, people should be coming here and like all they do is assimilate and like aspire. Not, let me not speak in generals, but like the goal is to aspire, but without like giving back like to community. And like they don't feel responsible for that at home because like they're here now.
I get what you're saying. Look, I can tell you on my behalf, right? I've been a part of this community for 20 years now, alhamdulillah. And a lot of what we try to do, it doesn't look that way because of COVID policies right now, but it's 10,000 person community. And much of what we sought to do was to build where there was identifiable gaps like you're talking about. And I think that's a part of institutional growth. I think there's a deep legacy within Black experience in the country that does a lot of what you're talking about in terms of Muslim leadership that immigrant Muslims are not fully aware of. And we don't kind of propagate so well because media, when they invite Muslims to speak on camera, tend to only invite people who are immigrants or children of immigrants. You don't see necessarily so many people who self-identify as Black and Muslim speaking on behalf of Muslim community on air. And again, I think that's purposeful, right? But I would say like the masjid serves a space. I don't know every single masjid in the country, so I couldn't say every masjid is not doing what it could do, but I could say that if one is not doing what it's supposed to be doing or should be doing, then you shouldn't be supporting that masjid and donating to it. And then you build with strategy and foresight apparatus that starts to now take on what it is that's problematic at levels that make sense, and you get buy-in from others who share in that vision with you. You know, and I think to me, good religion is what brings you to take on societal ills, right? And in a gathering like this, understanding that if your practice of religion is not bringing you to take on social ailments, then like, what's the point of your religion? I don't necessarily think that every Muslim has to do something, because even in the time of the Prophet, there's people who came to the Prophet and they said, here's all my money, right? Just sadaqah for the sake of the community. And he gave it back to them. He said, you're not gonna be able to handle this. And then there was other people who also gave a lot of their wealth, and he took it from them on behalf of like community charity, because they were just built a little bit differently than the other people. And so there's going to be some people who their Islam is going to be just what it is. And there's going to be others who go out, like you're saying, in the forefront, but being able to figure out how to find an empowered sense through your religion that says that fundamentally, none of us should be a part of the process of ever holding somebody down, and to think out where it is that we play a role. And so here, what this hadith is saying to me, I think creates a lot of these frames that we can draw more meaning from it. When you sit down and you start to think about it at a deeper level, there's nothing in our tradition that ever validates us being somebody who gains something at the advantage of somebody else losing something. And you have foundational hadith that we hear over and over and over again that give us indication of this. So as you start to now deepen in your relationship, you start to think about, well, what does this really mean? What is it calling me towards? What is the purpose of this? It's not that I come to a space and I engage in ritual practice and then I leave from it in the same state that I was in when I came in, but it starts to now be transformational. It starts to inform my ethics. It starts to inform my values. And I start to think deeply about what some of these things mean. And so if the Prophet is telling me be a shepherd, he's also telling me don't be predatorial. Be somebody who's a caretaker. Don't be somebody who is what the shepherd is protecting the sheep from. Be the one that is the protector. And you think about that now at scales of engagement and interaction. When this hadith continues, the first thing it speaks about is the role of kind of the communal leader in relation to the society on a whole. Like you're saying, somebody who's an appointed, it doesn't mean a governmental leader necessarily, but it's creating now a sense that the person who is most in charge even they have to understand that they have responsibility to a population, right? Because ours is a paradigm of leadership that's a servant-based model of leadership. It's not that you have a structure that there's a CEO and then everybody works to serve the interests of that person, but the persons in the leadership are there to serve the interests of the ones that are there in service of, right? What I want you to take away from this, amongst something else, is that we're not supposed to be the ones who are moved by like just our own satisfaction physically. And self-interest as a motivator is never going to advance the benefit communally or societally of any space, but it's also going to catch up to you at some point or another, because you're just creating now conundrum. You want to think about yourself in terms of, how do I embrace my role as this and I become a good follower? And how do I also embrace my role as this? And to understand that I can play both roles, and I want to do both of these without becoming now what it is that this is protecting this one from. And if there's not somebody like this, how do a bunch of these get together to at least ensure that they are supporting one another through whatever chaos comes in the way? You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? You don't want to be. And I've heard this now from a lot of new students and a lot of second-year students who their first year was here just as pandemic started. And students now, they're saying it's so hard to connect to people that if they don't go out of their way, nobody is necessarily asking them to like come and spend time with them or be with them. And they have to make every effort. And that can be pretty daunting and intimidating, right? We did like a bowling event the other day that some of you came to. I did amazing, by the way. And it was nice. I brought my babies, my kids, right? My 6-year-old, my 8-year-old. There was maybe like 60 or 70 of us there. That can't be like an institutional responsibility only. And some of you have to be creating spaces organically with an understanding that there's a bunch of people who right now are sitting by themselves that they don't know anybody. They're not going to pick up the phone and say, hey, let's all go out for dinner right now. Or, hey, it's somebody's birthday. We should do something together. Or, hey, you know, can I come and join you for even like a late night study session at Bopst, right? And so you got to think, if you can see things that you've experienced in your own time, what now becomes the role of somebody who embraces this? Shepherds don't make a lot of money, right? What shepherd do you know that's like the Prophet ﷺ, in his own words, he basically said that he was like making pennies as a shepherd. But you're doing it, why? He gets the benefit now of being in a space where he's a caretaker of these young creatures, watching them to move and grow and develop, to learn how to come into their own, so to speak. There's a different type of satisfaction that's not only rooted in material gain, right? The Hadith says, that true richness is not having an abundance of things of the earth, but true richness is having a richness of the soul. And so I'm saying it to us sitting here, like at the end of this semester, as it's getting colder outside and the days are much darker, it's really great when 10, 20 of us go to break fast together at Lipton. I can't be the person that's asking people to come and break their fast every time. And when we stand here to pray Maghrib, one of you should be getting up and inviting the whole room to come and break fast with us. Do you get what I'm saying? We can't be that after Jummah, when it's cold now, and we can't go sit in the park and eat anymore. right? You remember the last lunch we did at Jummah time? It was freezing. No, nobody's trying to eat outside when it's 20 degrees outside. So does that mean until the weather gets warmer, nobody's eating lunch together after Jummah is done? Or is like somebody gonna step up and embrace their role as a recognition of this narration and say, I'm just gonna get up and tell everybody, hey, let's all go eat at a dining hall. Let's all go eat at this restaurant. Do you get what I'm saying? Does that make sense? And the consciousness and the awareness and the attentiveness, right? Like some of your classmates, they're not going home over the winter break. COVID in some countries now has travel restrictions. A heart that is transformed, and I'm saying this because I love you, a heart that's transformed through ritual, that's awake and alive, is not going to hear that hadith, hear those news of travel bans and restrictions come into play and think, man, I can't go on my vacation now. It's going to think, man, what are the international students who are from those countries going to do? Do you get what I'm saying? Do you see what I mean? There's going to be some people who they might not have travel bans. They just can't afford to go home multiple times. Or even if there's not a ban now, they're going to be worried that what if something happens and I can't fly back into the country? Who's going to ask people, hey, do you want to come stay with my family for a bit during the break? Or maybe we could have a dinner at my house. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
It's revolutionary love.
Yeah, it's a revolutionary love. It's a, beloved community. You have radial love, but you're thinking from here. The shepherd is not thinking from the same place as the wolf. The wolf thinks from the stomach. The shepherd is thinking from the heart. The vision that creates intuition and foresight is not a vision of the eyes. It's basira. It's a vision of the heart. There's got to be love for the shepherds towards the sheep. Otherwise, it's going to care less. Like what happens? Let the wolf eat the sheep. It's not eating me. Right? So you got to start thinking deeply about it. Because now when it's like, well, what would the Prophet ﷺ do? The Prophet ﷺ would not be sitting saying like, I'm going to hang out with my companions and somebody else is just going to sit by themselves and have nobody to break fast with. But they're going to have to figure out an entire city as like a monstrosity of a city, right? In the midst of a cold winter, where some of these kids have never experienced a polar vortex before. What are they going to do? Do you get what I'm saying? This is why I say quite often, you don't need somebody's permission to do something good, man. You just got to start thinking from a place that is not the place that the wolf thinks from. And it's not just about overindulgence and eating, but there's an absence now of thoughtfulness. The wolf is only thinking about itself. It wants to just get what it wants and nothing else. And it's now an extreme opposite to the shepherd that's out there hanging out with these sheep like all day and all night. Just because that's what its responsibility is. You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Okay. Now I want to think about this in another frame as well. There's all this stuff written on this board. Can people follow when I write things on the board? Because I realize when, huh? My handwriting is bad. I know that. I know also when I don't write things, I get told that like my thoughts sometimes are hard to follow. Just want to make sure. So the shepherd too now is in a sphere where all the things that you guys said makes a lot of sense. Their attentiveness now is also rooted in focus, right? They're responsible for their flock. All of you are shepherds, and all of you are responsible for your sheep, your flock. Meaning, you're not responsible for somebody else's flock. Meaning, if you are in somebody else's business, then you are not paying attention to your responsibility. Do you get what I'm saying? So if the shepherd comes home at the other day, right? Riri's a shepherd and I'm a shepherd. And I come back and I was like, Riri was not doing her job today. How can I be fully attentive if my focus is now on her not doing what she needs to get done? If I'm in a sphere where my distraction towards focus now has me in a space where I am more kind of tied up in somebody else's ongoings and somebody else's business, then I'm not embodying the attentiveness that's needed to be able to deal with what's happening here. And that's not just like, you know, backbiting and gossiping and all this kind of stuff. That's what that is also, right? But for example, in the course of the pandemic, I was here in New York and I didn't travel like so much as I normally do. There was times where I was on a plane like pretty much every weekend, sometimes multiple times in a week. I can't focus on building my community if I am running around to other communities. Do you get what I mean? Nobody else is going to be my kid's dad. Nobody else is going to be my wife's husband. So the ability now to bear attentiveness to commitment. And this is why I wanted to bring in this verse from Surah Al-Muminoon that says, وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ لِأَمَانَاتِهِمْ وَعَدِهِمْ رَاعُونَ. Those who, over their trusts and their oaths, they also have this same kind of attentiveness that the shepherd has over the sheep. Right? It's emphasizing now honesty and integrity, which are key characteristics of our tradition. It's also giving a deeper understanding of what this person's got to be about. You got to be somebody who is honoring your personal trusts and your personal oaths. So if I decided that I'm going to be a dad, then I don't get to not be a dad because I'm raising somebody else. I care about all of you, but it can't be to the detriment of me not taking care of my own kids. You see what I mean? This is not how it works, right? And so the ability to think about this in the frame now of attentiveness in that way, it's also about like being in a space of recognition that you stay focused on your stuff. You do it with real ihsan, real excellence that's rooted now in love and compassion so that you're not scattered through 10, 20, 30 different ways. If shaitan can get you to do this much good when you have the capacity to do this much good, he's not going to get you to take steps backward necessarily always, but limit the capacity of your ability to be a source of benefit. I don't need to go and speak in every masjid and give a khutbah. Somebody else can do that. I don't have to be giving like a dars in some other masjid. Anybody else can do that. Do you get what I'm saying? And then the shepherd in relation to the sheep also now is in a space where, has anybody ever seen like a shepherd with sheep before? You have? Where have you seen that? In your village?
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about this? What does it look like, a shepherd with sheep?
Well, like the local person there that lives there, who like just have like a bunch of animals and he like follows them all day.
Okay, so here's a shepherd. How many sheep do you think they have? 50 to 100. So let's just say, you know, There's a lot of shepherds. These are all sheep. I don't know what I'm doing right now. Is it possible for this one shepherd to follow all 50 or 100 sheep simultaneously? Why? Huh? Yeah, he can't do it, right? If all of us, like, stood up and we all moved in different directions, and Riham is now it. And she had to follow all of us at once. How can she possibly do that? She can't, right? It's not physically possible for her to follow each one of us in different directions at the same time. So attentiveness in this relationship is not about micromanagement, but you're still giving the sheep some space to kind of come into their own and to be able to learn and to breathe and to make mistakes. And why that's important is because sometimes for some of us, that's not what the relationship is with the people who are looking after us, right? And then you get people who they don't know how to make any decisions or how to make any choices. They don't know how to step up and be in certain ways. You see what I'm saying? So like I can say to you that get up after Maghrib and tell the 20 people, 30 people we just prayed with, sisters, brothers, young, old, whoever, hey, we're going to eat. Come and eat with us. And then that's fine. And then you just decide how you're going to do it or not. And then you decide how you're going to invite other people and connect to other people. My job is not to do it for you, nor is it for me to call you every single day and say, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? How come you didn't do this? You didn't do it this way. You didn't do it that way. Do you get what I'm saying? And that space now to be able to formulate within one's own self an opportunity to learn how to succeed, as well as learn how to fail and get back on your feet after you've made a mistake, is what's going to make it easier to be in a place that the things that you have responsibility for, you're able to now on your own volition choose to honor those in the ways that they're meant to be honored. So you don't want to be overbearing. You don't want to be in a space where when God blesses you with children, may Allah give you the best of companions and give you children who you honor their rights and they honor your rights. Just let them be. And you are in a space where the shepherd is not chasing after every single one of the sheep. They're just there to make sure that they're not going to get into like real serious damage, right? Now think about this though. And to give you a perspective for yourself, this person, there's no way they can do that. But now, if there's just one of these guys, and they know that there's all these elements that are not really there, it's not that it makes it correct, but their focus here in trying to be what they need to be can yield now an opportunity for there to be that much more suffocation and overbearance and whatever else, right? And so the reciprocity in this relationship necessitates for this sheep to be able to unlearn certain things and to still then exert a sense of compassion and mercy. The same way, we're not supposed to be wolves. This person, if they are not exerting patience, kindness, compassion, etc., and being a protector, abuse is not tolerated in our tradition. Oppression in any form is not tolerated. But you start to think about, well, why might some of the people who are in this role, who in our collective history are the realities of colonization and slavery and imperialism and all of these things, be passing on something that they just have been holding on to within themselves? And how does it stop with me so I'm not pushing now more generational trauma and difficulty onto others. Do you get what I'm saying? But still, at some level, you got to embrace this first and just start to think with some foresight. So it's not just repetitiveness, right? Because the sheep could still just sit in the pasture and eat all day. It doesn't get big and obese and it can't move. The wolf's going to definitely eat it because it has no idea what's going on. Does that make sense? Okay. Any thoughts on this? Any questions, comments? What does it make you think about?
Capitalism. For me, the wolf is capitalism. Like it changes the metaphor entirely, but I think it makes a lot of sense because like Islam isn't inherently anti-capitalist, and it's this greed and this individualist society that's bringing people like that's shaping like how people practice Islam and like putting like yourself above others that is like not Islamic in essence. Then that's the wolf. Like that's the threat to Islam. That's the threat to us.
Yeah, I mean, Surah Al-Adiyat, it says, وَإِنَّهُ لِحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ. That indeed the love of khair is severe. And the Mufassirin, they say the word khair in that word means wealth, right? So it's humanity has a deep love of wealth. And it's Quran, you know? Anything else, like other thoughts? Yeah.
When you were talking about the the shepherd and the responsibility that like somebody who's in a role of like or a position of like authority or power or even just like anyone who's in a position to help other people should have to like the people to their community. I thought about doing good when no one's watching and intent. So like having compassion towards other people is really important. But like the example that you gave, like if we're at Jummah and somebody offers like take people to go eat when it's really cold outside, the intent behind that, you shouldn't be doing that because other people are watching. You should be feeling compassion towards the people that you want to help because you actually genuinely feel compassion for them. And maybe that's something personally that I want to work on is like is like building that connection with my community and not only doing things to remind myself to be good, but doing them because I genuinely want to do them.
The two can go hand in hand, right? Multiple intentions can exist within singularized actions in our tradition. So innamal a'malu binniyat, that actions are by their intentions, gives an indication that the gain and acceptance of an action is rooted in a good intention, but that there's ajr for every intention that you bring to singularized action. So you could do it for both of those reasons and multiple reasons on top of that, you know, and allow for it to be great. It's just you gotta be able to be comfortable with the fact of saying like, I can be a shepherd, and that's not like an arrogant thing, right? But person next to me isn't gonna say to the people sitting around me in a circle, hey, let's go and eat together. Like, don't wait for them, just do it. And what's gonna increase you in it is just the act of doing it in and of itself. It's going to give rise to what's happening. You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Right? Not like what everybody's got to eat, you know, right? And it doesn't even have to be like, you know, anybody want to watch a movie, you know, people want to do this, people want to do that. Let's go. Like, what do people really need at the end of the day? You know, my son and I, after Fajr, we were sitting on the couch, and I'm just like holding him close to me, and we're looking out of a window. Well, I live on 3rd Avenue in 20. I live in the Gramercy Green dorm. Anybody else live in Gramercy Green? Yeah. Have you been in the dorm? Yeah. So on 3rd Avenue, there's not a lot. There's one tree that's in front of our building. And we're looking at this tree. We're looking at other stuff. Sun's like rising, alhamdulillah. But like, I don't have to take him to Disney World. I can just share that as a moment with him. And that's it, you know? And it's fine. And it's great. And it brings us closer together. You don't have to like take people to super spectacular things. Just spend time with each other and create opportunities for that. and let people not feel like they have to be by themselves, right? When you get into your own head and you psych yourself out, like, oh my God, am I like this or am I like that? Or, somebody else needs to do this, or what will people think? Just shut it down, right? In that scenario, the wolf is the waswasa of shaitan, just trying to keep you from being able to do what it is that you have the ability to do. And subhanAllah, Allah creates like ease in the increase of compassion and mercy, because it's not you're giving a khutbah or leading a dars or like memorize the whole Quran. You just have to actively be compassionate to increase in compassion. The vehicle for the virtue's increase is the virtue in and of itself. Does that make sense? And after the first couple of times, I went to somebody's house for Thanksgiving over the weekend. And, we were there on Friday also for Jummah. My kids are like running around. They're 6 and 8. And everybody's waiting in the car for us. And, it's just like taking us a while. And in the midst of me like trying to get my kids to get their shoes on and everything else, this elderly man whose home we were in, he said, by the way, I told the local masjid that you were here and offered to them that you would give the khutbah today. And, is that okay? And the Jummah is starting in like 10 minutes. And I'm like, yeah, I guess so, right? And I was fine with it. I talk a lot, so it's not a problem in that sense. And that's nice of him. He thought about that. And so now in the car ride, I'm asking people, what's this community like? And they said, it's a lot of elder people. And so in the khutbah, I just talked to them about how it's important as elder people that they tell the younger people in their lives that they love them and they express affection. And I said, it might be awkward the first few times that you tell somebody that you've never told before, who's your child or a sibling or whatever, that you love them. Or you express apologies to somebody younger than you that you're sorry that you did something to them. But as you get accustomed to it, the awkwardness will subside and you'll be able to start to like reap the benefits of expressing that gratitude and affection and appreciation. And it's the same idea, right? You might feel a little out of place the first or second time that you do something, and that's okay. Courage is not about having no fear. Courage is about being able to stand up to the fear that presents itself to you, and it's subjective. So you don't psych yourself out and be like, this is something stupid to be afraid about. It's a hard thing, it's a hard thing, but you overcome it in your own individualized journey towards things. You see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Other thoughts? Okay, I want to be mindful of time. So just to reiterate, not to be redundant, whether you're on the Zoom or you're sitting here in person, the weather is getting colder. It's going to be a little bit harder. God forbid there's surges in cases and other things. Allah protect all of us and all people from any ailment or any type of harm or difficulty. Make us a means of support and healing for people in time of need. Just really spend some time tonight with yourselves, with each other. Just think about that there's still a lot of people who they're trying to figure out a lot of these things by themselves. And so the way that we really step up is not just in a rhetorical sense, but in the most practical sense of things. In the next few weeks especially, like be creative, right? God is the one that gave you the gift of creativity. Use it. Think about what will people need. Simple things. You set up times to study all together. You could use this room, whatever you want to. Study and boast. You want to have study breaks, watch movies on the screen, or set up like video game systems, or whatever it is. We can figure things out. I would love to have the problem of saying to somebody we can't do something, because there's too many ideas that people have of how we can ensure that in the coming weeks, people are coming together in meaningful ways and we're reaching out to others. And everything doesn't have to be event driven, that it's always, here's a program, come. But I'd love to get your help and your thoughts, as well as you all actively implementing how we create more organic interactions, right? Especially for underclassmen who are still trying to get situated, first semester on campus, whether they're first years or second years and they weren't here all of COVID, and they're still in a space where they're just trying to see how they connect to other people, especially other Muslims on campus. Does that make sense? So between this week and next week, think about it. If you have ideas, like let me know. Talk to each other though, also. And also, you don't have to let me know. Just go out and do it if you can. It'll really make a big difference for a lot of people. Inshallah.